Around the time of the 10th anniversary of the start of the post-9/11 wars, the Pew Research Center did a pair of surveys, one of veterans who had served in these wars and veterans who had served in earlier eras, and another of the general public, about a series of issues around what we call the military-civilian gap. One of our motivations, frankly, was that a number of senior leaders of the military have talked about this gap and have talked about the anomaly in our history that we've been fighting these particular wars for a decade now. They're the longest wars in our history, and we've been fighting them with the smallest share of the population actually carrying the fight. If you go back through our modern history, if you go back to World War II, nearly 9% of the population of the country was in the armed services. In this decade, while we've been fighting the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, only about 1/2% of the population has been in the armed services. So we did surveys both of veterans. We spoke to a nationally representative sample of more than 1,800 veterans, of whom about 712 had served in the post-9/11 era. And we also did a nationally representative sample of the general population of the United States. Among the veterans, what we found are a striking set of findings, on the upside and the downside. Overwhelmingly, post-9/11 veterans are proud to have served. They feel like their service has made them more mature human beings, given them more self-confidence. 70%, more than 70%, say it has helped them, help prepare them for a job or a career after their military life. But a very high share also report difficulties as they've readjusted to civilian life. About half say they've experienced strains in their family relationships, often felt irritable or angry. They just overall had problems readjusting. And nearly 4 in 10, 37%, say that whether they have been officially diagnosed or not, they have suffered symptoms of post-traumatic stress. When we looked a little deeper into this population of post-9/11 veterans, we find that on all these measures, there are significant differences depending on whether the veteran had actually served in combat or not. And not surprisingly, those who had served in combat were much more likely to report high levels of difficulty readjusting. For example, if you served in combat, about half said that they had experienced the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. If you hadn't served in combat, only 17% said that. We also were able to compare the experiences of post-9/11 veterans with pre-9/11 veterans on many of these measures, and we found that generally speaking, the post-9/11 veterans are more likely to report difficulties readjusting to civilian life. For example, 37% say they had suffered PTS in the post-9/11 group, only 16% in the pre-9/11 group. We asked veterans of these post-9/11 wars their attitudes about the overall worth of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. We found a lot of ambivalence. Just half of the post-9/11 veterans who had served during this period say that the Afghanistan war has been worth it, and just 44% say that the war in Iraq has been worth it. These shares a little bit higher than those of the general public, but nonetheless represent an ambivalent view of the wars that they themselves fought. So overall, when we look at the responses to both questions about these wars, we find among post-9/11 veterans, about a third say that both have been worth it, about a third say neither have been worth it, and the rest say one or the other or don't know. Our survey of the civilian population, the general public, finds overwhelming pride and support for those who have served. 90% say they're proud of the soldiers who have served in the military. 3/4 say they've thanked someone in the military for their service, and more than half say they've done something in particular to help someone in the military or the military family. And this is in the context of a broader trend. We and other organizations have been surveying for decades about confidence in various institutions. And over the last 30 or 40 years, the one institution that has risen in terms of its level of confidence from the general public is the military. And among 16 different institutions that we and others have studied, the military sits atop this list. 80 or so percent say they have confidence in the military. So our general public both is very supportive of, very proud of the soldiers themselves, and very supportive of the institution of the military. Nonetheless, there is an acknowledgement on both sides of the military-civilian divide that there's not a great deal of understanding across that divide. So when, in particular, we asked post 9/11 veterans, do you think the public understands the problems you face, the rewards that you receive from serving? Overwhelmingly, veterans say no, they don't. And the general public, 7 in 10, also agree, no, we really don't understand what it is like to serve in the military. We then asked the public a question about sacrifice in the post 9/11 era. We asked whether or not the military and their families have had to make a lot of sacrifice in the post 9/11 era. More than 8 in 10 said yes. Then we asked, have the American people been asked to make a lot of sacrifices in the post 9/11 era? And many fewer, only about 40% said yes. And then we asked the follow-up of those who acknowledge there's a gap in what the public versus the military has been asked. And we said, is the fact that the military has been asked to do more, is there something unfair about this, or is it just part of being in the military? And here we had the public, by very heavy numbers, 7 in 10, saying, no, in effect, it's just part of being in the military. This is a part of the deal that they signed up for. A final question we asked on this survey of both the veterans and the general public was whether they'd advise a young person close to them to join the military or not. And here again, we found a pretty significant difference in attitudes. The veterans, both pre and post 9/11, by heavy numbers said yes. It's a good career choice. It's a very important experience. And the general public, not so much. Only 48% said that they would advise a young person to join them.